It's Saturday morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Rich Lieberman on my YouTube show. Today I want to talk about Ray Taliaferro, one of the most unique and talented, funny, and creative to the max personalities in Bay Area media. And I say that sort of maybe overstating the case, but I don't think so. Ray Taliaferro was he's now past tense because he died. He was it's a very, very mysterious situation what took place, but he died a few years ago. And Ray and I grew up in the Bay Area in the 70s, right? And few people remember this, but Ray Taliaferro started out at KRON. He did the midday show, the news show, and he was the entertainment personality and would always interview somebody like a pianist or a jazz person or somebody in the arts. And in fact, he served, did Ray Taliaferro, on the Arts Commission in San Francisco. And his media career began at KRON. And in the early to mid 70s, he was on KRON during the noon hour. And then he did a stint, as I mentioned, on the San Francisco Arts Commission, and was a piano player himself, not professionally, but he did play at various functions, and he, of course, played at his house at the time. And then Ray found his niche on radio, KGO Radio, where he began in 1978. And I distinctively remember the first time I ever heard Ray Taliaferro was, of all things, we're coming up, I think today is the anniversary, I think. Is it the 15th, 16th? Yeah, November 18th, 1978. Ray was on KGO Radio when the horrific news broke of what was taking place and what was about to take place in Guyana with the Reverend Jim Jones and the People's Temple and the massacre and the homicide and suicide. Ray was on the air that day on KGO, November 18th, 1978, which I believe, today is the 45th anniversary of that. Oh my God. Terrible, 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 terrible tragedy involving Jim Jones and People's Temple. But anyway, so Ray was on KGO and he began a talk show career that was on the overnight. Ray did the overnight show on KGO. And he developed kind of a unique personality. He was both funny, sometimes unintentionally, and controversial, and he was quite the figure. And he was already a public personality in San Francisco. As I mentioned, he served on the Arts Commission with, I believe, Terry Francois, who was a supervisor at the time. And Ray was very, very controversial even then, before his broadcast career. And I'll go into this in a second, but Ray, that was his first introduction to Willie Brown, who was the assembly speaker at the time, or in the assembly, I should say, based out of San Francisco. And Willie would become assembly speaker and then the mayor of San Francisco. He had a very, very, very turbulent relationship with Ray Taliaferro, which I'll get into in a second. So Ray began his talk show career with KGO. And as I said, controversial. He was flamboyant. He was, he would talk about the news, and he was kind of a liberal guy. And he was on during the term of, Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan and, of course, Barack Obama at his first term. And then Um, like I said, Ray was funny. He was kind of crazy with callers. He had a distinctive voice. And matter of fact, his voice was very, very. I remember a couple of comedians used to do, sir, good morning. You're on KGO with Ray Taliaferro. You know, he had this distinctive broadcast voice, and oftentimes would get into long, lengthy arguments, but in a unique kind of a funny way with callers. And the more you disagreed with Taliaferro, the longer you were going to be on the air. And if you were outrageous or crazy or some nutty guy who used to call him, and this guy still calls around various talk shows, is this crazy Lennon guy, this guy who says that John Lennon was murdered by, I'm laughing now because every time I say this, I laugh myself, by Peter King. He's this guy out of Santa Cruz. His name is Stephen Lightfoot. And he used to call Ray, and he called all the talk shows and C-SPAN and Larry King, and he would sound very normal, right? At first, he would call in and give a very believable, straightforward talk. He'd usually have something worthwhile to say, and then he would all of a sudden, John Lennon got killed by Stephen King. It made no sense. And anyway, he would inevitably end up on Ray Taliaferro, and Ray wouldn't cut him off right away. Ray would actually talk to this guy, and he would kind of giggle and try to make it sound as if everything was cool and normal. That was Ray's way of retaliating against this kind of nutty guy, conspiratorial guy, who really did believe that, John Lennon was off by Stephen King. I'm giving him way too much coverage right now by talking about him. He's going to start calling my show. In any event, so Ray Taliaferro was very, very popular and unique, as I said. I'm being kind when I say unique. There's more to it than just unique. Ray was a character, and he usually worked the overnight shift 1 to 5 on KGO. That's 1 to 5, obviously, in the morning. And he would precede the morning news. And he always used to comment on the fact that, I'm on here in the middle of the night, but in other parts of the world, it's the beginning of the morning. So this is my prime time, too, and prime time in the rest of the world. So don't ever say, Ray, why are you on in the middle of the night? He had, a unique way of communicating, to say the least. And I can't believe he's still gone. He was so talented and funny. And I swear to God, and those of you who listen to Ray, he was funny. I mean, I know people that used to, and this was not pre-internet. Well, when he started out, it was pre-internet. But he would take emails and talk about various news talk items of the day. And he would always refer to God as that big black woman in the sky. I got to meet Ray a few times because I had a couple of friends that worked at KGO, Michael Krasny and Ron Owens. Very early in his career, I knew Ron and continued to, we've had kind of a breakup, but I want to stay away from that. Those of you who read my blog at 415 Media know about my situation with Ron Owens. In any event, I got to meet Ray, and he would always be there early, right? Which most talk show hosts do. They have to prepare and read and do all the things that you do when you're a talk show host, right? And I remember Ray would go into the studio at KGO, right there on 900 front. Before that, at 277 Golden Gate Avenue, which was the KGO studio, the old KGO studio that had no windows and was there. And then ultimately KGO Radio moved to the KGO TV studio on studios at 900 front. Anyway, Ray would show up in the studio. Two distinctive things about Ray Taliaferro. He'd have a couple of six packs of ginger ale. He loved ginger ale. And, you're working the overnight. So you either have the coffee or you'd have whatever soft drinks and Coke, 7 Up, whatever. Ray Taliaferro had a voluminous amount, usually a couple of six packs of a ginger ale. And he also went into the studio. It looked like when Ray did his deal before going on the air, it looked like you were in a cockpit of an airline. He would turn the overhead lights off, except the one light directly above the studio. And at first I thought, well, what is he doing? Is this? It dawned on me. Somebody told me this. It was one of the producers. Check this story. This is a story you've never heard before. You're going to hear it now. Ray also was leery and out worried and scared that some nutcase with a gun would try to aim at him. And the irony of that is, by turning all the lights off and just having one light focused on him, that obviously would create a decent target, right? Ray didn't take that into account. But in any event, all the studio lights would be turned off except for the one overhead light that would be on. And so it was for two reasons. I mentioned the fact that he was worried about getting assassinated. And he also, for cause and effect, that was his way of staying awake, right? So it looked like like he was in a spaceship, for God's sakes, or in a cockpit. Little thing that you should know about. And in fact, there was a caller to KGO, and Taliaferro had the producer call the cops and call the authorities and all that. He was this caller that Ray perceived as being threatening. And I guess he got some kind of a threatening, or I don't know the whole parameters of what it was, but it was a guy who used to call KGO, Frank in Marin, or somewhere in Marin. I think it was Frank in Nevada, but he was Frank. And he was scary, I guess, according to Ray Taliaferro. So, in any event, Ray, with the ginger ale, the overhead light, the rest of the lights off, became quite a fixture at KGO. And he used to, it was obviously left-leaning if you listen to him. But he was also interesting in the fact that he would talk about all the news talk subjects, and he was a big, big, big time aficionado of jazz, right? And before Ray came on KGO, who was on KGO? It was, oh darn, you see what happens when you leave your phone on? Al Jasbo Collins, right? No, but anyway, Ray Taliaferro was a big jazz guy. And every New Year's Eve, Ray would do a special show on New Year's Eve. And it would be a really, really cool show. And he'd have on this jazz guy, I believe his name was Vernon Alley, and they would talk about and play old jazz standards. And real popular. That was Ray's contribution on that end. He was very much into music. I believe, in addition to serving on the San Francisco Arts Commission, he also played at the various old Fillmore area where a lot of the Black population used to live. In those days, it was very much, the Fillmore was very much majority of Black people. Anyway, so Ray played the piano, but he also played church organ at some of the most incredible, churches in San Francisco at that time. Was on the Arts Commission, served with Terry Francois, who was a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And inevitably, Ray would have encounters with Willie Brown, who was assemblyman at the time. And of course, as I just mentioned earlier, became Speaker of the House in California and ultimately the mayor. And Ray and Willie Brown were like fire and ice. There was, and he referred if to that. If you called KGO and make reference to Willie Brown, Ray would inevitably, I distinctively remember this. Oh, don't mention that name. Don't that is one phony. And he would go on. I'm mimicking Ray Taliaferro, but he had a really, really, really bad relationship with Willie Brown. And I think Willie knows about it. I would like, maybe we'll try to get Willie Brown on, but Willie could probably talk about his own relationship with Ray Taliaferro because there was no relationship. It was very, 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 like I said, fire and ice. And I don't know, to this day, I think it had something to do with what was taking place in San Francisco at the time. And him and Willie did not see eye to eye, and it got personal and it got very, very vindictive, and it's something that was not often explored. I really like Willie to go over it one day. Maybe we'll try to get Willie on. In any event, so Taliaferro started at Cron, then got a talk show on KGO, and as I said, it was unique and funny and informative, and I mean, seriously, there were comics who got off stage, and Ray was so popular they were listening to Taliaferro on KGO, and he would get a cross section of people that would call, not only locally but up north, Oregon and Washington and Canada. And Ray was just, you have to listen. I'm going to try to post something here where you can listen to the kind of relationship he had with callers. Because as I said, if you disagreed with him, but was funny or challenging or constructive, Ray would often talk with certain callers for like 10 minutes and would go on and he would almost say a few things like, I'm going to pipe you down. I'm going to leave you on there. I'm not going to cut you off. I'm going to pipe you down, but you've got to listen. And then he would take these crazy people that would call in, and Ray would kind of like toy with them. And you could not fluster Ray Taliaferro. You can try, like the guy, Stephen Lightfoot, the Lennon guy. You couldn't fluster Ray Taliaferro. So good luck. And then ultimately Ray was very, very, very popular. He did other appearances across the cultural, the social, media landscape in San Francisco. And again, if you listen to Taliaferro, you know what I'm talking about. If you didn't listen to Ray, I'm going to try to post something here. You'll get an idea like, who the heck is this guy? And he developed a real following. And sometimes, he'd just go off and start yelling and screaming, but it was not shock jockish. It was kind of, as I said in the headline, he was unique, to say the least. I'm going to leave for now. If you want to email me, it's rich.lieberman@gmail.com. If you want to contribute money to the blog or to me or both and my YouTube channel, please do go up to my PayPal site, the donate site on the right side of the blog, and it all goes to a good cause, which is my ability to keep you entertained and informed. Have a great Saturday.